Please pray with me. May these words that I speak be grounded in my soul, encouraged by the Spirit presence in me. And may these words that you hear be captured by your soul, enlivened by the Spirit presence in you. Amen. I wonder how often Jesus said, "Do you still not understand? Do you still not understand that God is an experience, not a thing?" His inner circle of students, men and women, lived, ate, slept, and traveled with him for about 3 years. Yet, with the exception of Mary of Magdala, I suspect he asked that question more than once daily. Do you still not understand? He lived and died committed, deeply committed to showing people that love is the very nature and experience of God, period. How tragic that for nearly 2,000 years now, churches of all stripes have focused on defining God by what they think God might be, rather than by what we experience as God presence. Jack Kornfield tells this story in his book titled After the Ecstasy, the Laundry. And for those that were at the council meeting, I apologize, you're hearing this for the second time. Is this cutting out?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Again? I'll speak loud. The story is, a teacher of the spiritual way was walking along a path near a river when he noticed a crowd of people a short distance ahead. When he reached where they were gathered, he realized they were looking with awe at one of his students who was crossing the river by walking on the water. Incensed, the teacher called the student back to the shore, took hold of him by the scruff of the neck, and put him on board a ferry that was tied to a nearby dock. This, he said emphatically, is how you cross a river. Tom Stella, author of CPR for the Soul, says about this story addresses the commonly held misconception that spirituality refers to a realm above and beyond everyday life, and to living in a way that is other than ordinary. But the drama theatrics of walking on water is not an indication of spiritual maturity. What does demonstrate spiritual maturity is the awareness that crossing a river in a boat and all normal activity is sacred. I would add that it's not about the ferry. You could kayak, canoe, take a motorboat, go over a bridge, wade, or swim, whatever path you choose. It is not about the ferry. It is about grounding our spiritual life in the ordinary lives we live and accepting that everything is sacred. Everything is sacred. So why am I saying this on Pentecost Sunday? It is because gale force, rushing wind, and leaping tongues of fire in no way reflects the Holy Spirit, the God Spirit, the Spirit of love that Jesus knew and experienced. This notion of a purely external spirit, separate from us and the world, is the creation of a religion that chose to see sacred and secular as separate. But they are not, unless we choose ourselves to see the world that way. As long as we think the Spirit is some elusive thing out there that we need to wait for, we will keep ourselves separate from a real experience of God. Worshipping the sacred will just be another thing we do each week or so. Holy Spirit, Sacred Spirit, God Spirit, however you choose to name it, is already a part of our being, part of who we are as spiritual beings on a human journey. Paul understood this when he wrote to the early followers in Rome, the passage that Jeanette shared this morning. We ourselves have the first fruits of the Spirit, and the Spirit helps us in all of life. It is the God Spirit that dwells in each heart. In the great basilica in Assisi, where St. Francis is buried, there is apparently a wonderful bronze sculpture of Francis inviting the Holy Spirit. Instead of looking upward, as is usual, in this sculpture, Francis is looking downward, reverently and longingly into the earth, where the Spirit is enmeshed. Francis understood, like Jesus, like Mary of Magdala, like Paul, and like more than a few others, that the Spirit is forever and first of all here. We need to turn our way of being in relationship with that Spirit, God, if you prefer, away from thinking that we are standing on the bank watching the river of God. The best way I have found to understand this way of being in God or in the Spirit is to think of the God Spirit, that Spirit of love, as the river or any other body that you want to imagine of water. And we are fish. We're fish. The water, the Spirit, surrounds us and flows through us. It gives us life, and it shows us that we are never alone in any circumstance. Seeing ourselves separate from that God Spirit, separate from that river, and that same fish suddenly thrown onto dry land, well, we know what happens then. This way of seeing our relationship with Spirit is what I believe because I have evidenced it over and over and over again in my own life. No one can be taught about love, right, or truth in the way we are taught how to count or spell or read. It is a Spirit that dwells within us that shows us the way to live. I know what is love and I know what is fear because of the God Spirit within me. I know what is right and I know what is wrong because of the God Spirit within me. I know what is a truth and I know what is a falsehood because of the God Spirit within me. And so do each of you. Pentecost isn't a time of waiting for the Spirit to come. Rather, it is a reminder to embrace the Spirit that surrounds us and fills us from the inside out. And in the words of Ruby and Errol, go for it. Go for it. In the children's story today, Ruby and Errol, searching for the golden pool, follow the fish. They follow the fish that's already swimming in the water. It is that going into that brings them to their own golden pool. The realization that the sacred, special place they were looking for was in the world and was part of the river. They also discover later in the story that the great river of life is not always a smooth ride. So you need to learn that all of life is sacred in the good and even the not so good. Sometimes we have to pause and reflect, and sometimes we have to trust and act. In all of life, it is the Spirit within us that will help us to see that we are part of one great Spirit, one great love, the big river of God. I invite you to hear Mary Oliver's poem once again with this in mind. At Blackwater Pond, the tossed waters have settled after a night of rain. I dip my cupped hands. I drink a long time. It tastes like stone, leaves, fire. It falls cold into my body, waking my bones. I hear them deep inside me whispering, "Oh, what is this beautiful thing that just happened?" Spirit. Barbara Holmes, African-American professor of ethics and president of the United Theological Seminary in Minneapolis, writes, "When you least expect it, during the most mundane of daily tasks, a shift of focus occurs. This shift bends towards the universe, a cosmos of soul and spirit, bone and flesh, which constantly reaches toward divinity. Ecclesial organizations want to control access to this milieu, but cannot. The only divisions between the sacred and the secular are in the minds of those who believe and reinforce the split." Stop your waiting. Give up the belief that you have to walk on water to touch the sacred. Instead, I invite you to swim or wade or kayak in the big river and discover there what it is to be truly alive in the Spirit. Amen.